This surveillance footage captures the last known moments before Aniah Blanchard vanished. It's October 23rd, 2019, at a Chevron gas station in Auburn, Alabama. Aniah is 19 years old. She is 3 miles from home, stopping for a late-night snack. Inside the store is Ibrahim Yazid, out on bond while facing violent charges in another case. Aniah pays and walks back out. Ibrahim Yazid follows her. She never makes it home that night. Aniah Blanchard was not the kind of person who didn't pay attention. She paid more attention than almost anyone around her knew, and that attention came from somewhere real. She had a fear she carried with her everywhere, the constant fear of being kidnapped. She talked about it, she had nightmares about it, and she made actual plans around it. When she moved into her dorm at Southern Union State Community College and got a roommate for the first time, the very first thing she did was sharing her iPhone location. Not because the school suggested it, not because it was part of some orientation checklist, because Aniah insisted on it. Her roommate was Sarah O'Brien, and from the very first day, she understood that this wasn't a casual thing between friends. It was something deeper than that.
We actually shared each other's location on our iPhone. Since the day I met Aniah, she always told me that that was her biggest fear, to be kidnapped or murdered.
That fear was real, and it was specific, and no one who knew her well dismissed it. But Aniah was so much more than her fear. She was studying early childhood education because she genuinely loved kids. Not the idea of working with them, but actually being around them, caring for them. In high school, she played varsity softball. She had a laugh that filled a room before she even got to the punchline. Her favorite color was baby blue, and the people who loved her called her Blue Sunflower, because that's exactly what she was. Bright, warm, the kind of person a room notices when she walks in. She had a younger sister, a brother named Elijah Jr., and a dog named Blue, spelled without the E because that's the way she wanted it. He went everywhere with her. She never left him alone if she could help it. Her biological father was Aniah Blanchard, a Birmingham businessman. Her mother, Angela, had remarried, and the man she married, UFC heavyweight fighter Walt Harris, had come into Aniah's life when she was just 3 years old. Walt raised her as his own. She was his daughter in every way that mattered. She was careful, she was loved, she was paying attention, and on the night of October 23rd, 2019, none of it was enough. October 23rd had already been a long, heavy day. Aniah and her brother Elijah had driven with their mother up to Winfield, Alabama for a family friend's funeral, then made the long drive back south toward Auburn. On the way home, they stopped in Homewood to see Walt. He was training for his next fight. Aniah said she was tired. Walt told her she could stay the night. She hugged him, told him she loved him, and said she was fine. He watched them drive away. Walt still thinks about that moment. I should have told them to stay. Angela had already said her own goodbye earlier that day, at the funeral, before they made the drive back. She kissed Aniah on the cheek and told her she loved her. She had no way of knowing what those words were carrying that day. When they got back to Auburn, Aniah dropped Elijah off at his apartment. They said, I love you. He told her to be careful. She smiled and drove away. At 11:09 p.m., her roommate Sarah texted to ask if she was close to being home. Aniah replied, yeah. She was on South College Street, 3 miles from her front door, 2 minutes away, maybe less. And then she turned into the Chevron. Surveillance footage inside the store captured Aniah at around 11:21 p.m., buying a drink and a bag of sour cream and onion potato chips. She wasn't alone in that store. A man was already inside, standing near the counter. He had been in the area since at least 9 p.m. that night. Investigators later tracked his phone to the Chevron area at 9:01 p.m. He was watching her. When she walked back out to the parking lot, a witness saw what happened next. He saw a man force Aniah into her own car. He turned to the woman next to him. She told him to mind his own business, and so he walked away. About 20 minutes later, something strange happened. A Snapchat message went out from Aniah's phone to Sarah. It said she was smoking a blunt. Sarah replied, asked who she was with. The message came back, Eric. When Sarah asked who that was, the response came, I just met him. That wasn't how Aniah texted. That wasn't how she wrote. Her father, when he later saw those messages, said flat out he didn't believe they came from his daughter. Prosecutors would later argue at trial that Yazid himself wrote those messages and that he used the wrong name. Sarah went to sleep uneasy, but she had checked Aniah's location first. It was showing an apartment complex nearby. She told herself it was probably fine. Aniah would be home in the morning. She wasn't. By morning, Blue was sitting alone in the apartment. Aniah hadn't come home. Her location had stopped updating entirely, and she was supposed to be at her babysitting job for Karina, a job she had never once missed, not a single time. Angela said later it was the dog that confirmed everything for her. Aniah would never leave Blue overnight. That was the moment she knew. That was when she called the police. The missing persons report was filed on October 24th. Investigators immediately started pulling surveillance footage, financial records, and license plate reader data from cameras across the area. They retraced her route. They visited every nearby business with a camera. At the Murphy USA station near the Walmart on South College Street, they found something. Footage showed what appeared to be Aniah's black Honda CR-V pulling up to the pumps and a man getting out of the passenger side to make a purchase. A man in a camouflage jacket, the same jacket he'd been wearing at the Chevron. License plate readers captured the vehicle heading south on I-85 toward Montgomery just after midnight. On October 25th, 2 days after she disappeared, Aniah's Honda CR-V was found abandoned at an apartment complex in Montgomery, 55 miles from Auburn. The car, according to police, appeared to be in disarray. Inside, investigators found what they had been dreading. Blood. Concentrated in the front passenger seat. The state crime lab confirmed it was Aniah's and said whoever lost that much blood had sustained a life-threatening injury. There was a bullet hole in the passenger side door, shell casings in the cup holder. Over 40 individual pieces of evidence were eventually processed from that vehicle. Something violent had happened inside. What followed was one of the largest searches in Alabama history. 11 agencies joined the task force, including the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. The reward for information rose fast, eventually passing $100,000 as support poured in from across the country. Walt, though, had only one thing on his mind: finding his daughter. He pulled out of the December fight he had spent years building toward, the biggest of his career, and went home to search for her. Angela went on television. She sat in front of cameras with Aniah's name on her lips, repeating it over and over, begging anyone who knew anything to come forward. The family held vigils. They organized search parties. They refused to go quiet. And for weeks, there was nothing. No tips that led anywhere, no answers, just silence. Then, on November 7th, 2 weeks after Aniah vanished, Auburn police announced they had identified the man captured on the Chevron surveillance footage. His name was Ibrahim Yazid. When investigators ran his record, the picture was alarming. In January 2019, just 9 months before Aniah disappeared, Yazid had been arrested and charged with attempted murder, 2 counts of first-degree kidnapping, and 2 counts of first-degree robbery in Montgomery County. He posted $295,000 bond, and he walked right back out. A man facing attempted murder and kidnapping charges, out on bond, free to move around, free to be inside a gas station in Auburn on a Wednesday night in October, watching a 19-year-old girl pay for her drink. That was not a mistake. That was the law written exactly as written. The same day investigators identified Yazid, U.S. Marshals tracked him to Pensacola, Florida. When they found him near Interstate 10, he ran and hid in the trees. They had to pull him out. He had not been free since. 2 other men were arrested for what happened after. At trial, Antoine Fisher, known as Squirmy, testified that in the early hours of October 24th, Yazid showed up unexpectedly at the home he shared with his then father-in-law, David Big Dave Jr. Fisher told the jury Yazid was dirty, scratched up, shirtless, and wearing only shorts. He needed a ride. Fisher told the jurors he followed Yazid through Montgomery that night, to the apartment complex where Aniah's car was abandoned, through an alley, into a neighborhood near Fairview Avenue, and eventually north on I-85 into Macon County. Fisher said he stayed in the vehicle at the final stop and did not know what Yazid was doing in the dark. Later, back at David Johnson Jr.'s house, Fisher said Yazid looked at him, pressed a finger to his lips, then dragged it across his throat. Fisher told jurors he understood the message clearly: stay quiet or die. Prosecutors ultimately decided Fisher did not meet the legal threshold for accomplice liability and did not charge him. David Johnson Jr., however, was charged with hindering prosecution for helping Yazid that night. By then, investigators had their suspect, Aniah's car, supporting testimony, and physical evidence, but they still hadn't found Aniah. So, her family kept searching.
Aniah, I love you, and the mommy is not going to give up till I find you. We're going to bring you home, Aniah. You're coming home, so don't worry.
That video was one of many. For weeks, the family had put themselves in front of every camera they could find. Walt, Angela, Elijah, all of them, because silence felt too much like surrender. So they kept speaking into it, hoping something, somewhere, would come back. For more than a month, nothing did. Then, on November 25th, 33 days after Aniah disappeared, a tip finally broke the silence. Auburn police and the task force drove out to a remote wooded area off County Road 2 in the shorter community of Macon County near New Hope Baptist Church. At 10:45 that morning, just a few feet into the tree line, they found what they had been searching for: human remains scattered across the ground. 2 days later, on November 27th, the day before Thanksgiving, the state crime lab confirmed through DNA testing what the family already feared. The remains were Aniah's. She had been there since late October. While her family held vigils, went on television, searched, begged, and waited, Aniah had already been gone. She was 19 years old. At trial, prosecutors said the physical evidence pointed to a brutal sequence. Aniah was shot inside her own vehicle, then taken to County Road 2, where they argued she was shot again in the head before being left in those woods. But the evidence pointed to something else, too. She fought. Prosecutors argued that there had been a struggle, that Aniah did not go quietly, and when Ibrahim Yazid later appeared at David Big Dave Johnson Jr.'s house, dirty, scratched up, and barely dressed, the state treated that as part of the same story, proof that even in those final moments, Aniah fought back with everything she had. After the funeral, the family's grief hardened into a question they could not shake. How was he free? The answer was not a glitch in the system, it was the law. At the time, Alabama judges could deny bail only in capital cases. Ibrahim Yazid had been charged with violent crimes, but not capital murder. Under the law as it stood, he was entitled to bond. So the family pushed for change. Aniah's law moved through the legislature, was signed by Governor Kay Ivey in 2021, and in November 2022, Alabama voters approved it as a constitutional amendment. It now gives judges the power to deny bail to defendants charged with a range of serious violent crimes, including murder, kidnapping, robbery, arson, domestic violence, and human trafficking. The law that failed Aniah cannot fail the next person the same way. But the family's response did not stop with legislation. In 2020, Walt and Angela launched Aniah's Heart, a nonprofit created to support other families facing the nightmare they had lived through, and to help fund self-defense training for young women. And 6 months after Aniah was found, Walt stepped back into the octagon. He almost didn't. He said he did not know if he would ever fight again. Then, Aniah came to him in a dream. She was sitting in the living room, surrounded by light, her arms open. He hugged her, and she told him, "Keep going." He woke up with renewed energy. On May 16, 2020, Walt walked into the cage wearing a shirt that read, "Fighting for Aniah." He hurt Alistair Overeem badly in the first round, but Overeem recovered and stopped him in the second. It was not the result he wanted. But afterward, Walt looked at the camera and made another promise to his daughter. "Baby girl, Daddy loves you, and I promise I will keep pushing." He was back. In November 2022, a grand jury indicted Ibrahim Yazid on 3 counts of capital murder: murder during a kidnapping, murder during a robbery, and murder involving a victim inside a vehicle. In March 2023, he pled not guilty to all 3 counts. What followed was nearly 3 more years of hearings, motions, and delay. In 2025, the Alabama Attorney General's office used the state's new Speedy Trial Act to move the case forward, and Chief Justice Sarah Stewart appointed retired Judge Tom F. Jr. to preside. Then, at a January 16, 2026 status hearing, with trial finally approaching, Yazid interrupted proceedings.
They don't have no video, no audio of me shooting anyone. That's what I'm trying to see. How y'all gonna bind me over on hearsay, but y'all ain't presenting no evidence.
Less than 2 months later, opening statements began on March 9, 2026, in Tuskegee. The defense opened with a slow clap. From the start, their case was built on doubt. They argued the investigation had been tainted, the witnesses were unreliable, and the state's case was circumstantial. They pointed out that no DNA belonging to Yazid was found in Aniah's vehicle, that there were no fingerprints of value tying him to the crime, and that no video captured the abduction itself. Over 6 days, the prosecution built a different picture. 32 witnesses, surveillance from Chevron and Murphy USA, Aniah's blood in the passenger side floorboard, shell casings, phone records, cell tower data, Fisher's testimony, hair and clothing items recovered in Pensacola, where Yazid was arrested, and, months later, a 9mm casing and a lead projectile recovered from a Montgomery property investigators said was associated with him. When the state rested, the defense called no witnesses. Just before closing arguments, the third capital count, the one involving a victim inside a vehicle, was dropped. Yazid went to the jury on 2 counts: capital murder during a kidnapping and capital murder during a robbery. Deliberations began on the morning of March 18, 2026. The next day, at noon on March 19, 2026, the verdict came in: guilty of murder and felony murder, not capital murder. Inside the courtroom, Aniah's family wept and held each other. Outside, supporters embraced in the parking lot. It was a conviction, but not a capital murder conviction the state had asked for. Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall said he would seek the maximum sentence allowed by law. Sentencing is scheduled for May 7, 2026. Nearly 7 years after a 19-year-old stopped at a gas station 3 miles from home. Aniah's story didn't end in those woods. Her name is now part of Alabama state law. Her foundation, Aniah's Heart, continues to help families and teach young women how to fight back. Her tragedy sparked real change, and her memory still pushes all of us to pay attention and speak up. The verdict is in, but the story isn't over. Sentencing is scheduled for May 7th, 2026.